Every 65 seconds, someone in the United States develops Alzheimer's. It doesn't begin with forgetting your loved one's name. It doesn't start with getting lost on your way home. It starts with something far quieter, something almost no one notices until it's too late to turn back. Maybe it's a word that vanishes mid-sentence, or a moment of confusion while reaching for the keys, unsure whether you were about to leave or had just arrived. Small things, harmless even, until they begin to string together like a quiet pattern, a whisper from the brain that something deeper is changing. My name is Dr. Edward. For over 30 years, I've worked with thousands of older adults, men and women who were once full of stories, laughter and clarity, and who slowly began to drift into forgetfulness. But here's what breaks my heart. Most of them didn't realize it was happening. They thought they were just getting older. And by the time the signs became obvious to their families, the disease had already crept deep into their minds. Today, I want to change that for you or someone you love. In this video, we'll walk through 5 early signs of Alzheimer's that often go unnoticed. These are not the classic symptoms you've heard about. These are the subtle, quiet shifts that happen in the very beginning, when there's still time to take action, to get help, and to possibly slow things down. You'll learn how to recognize them early. I'll share the stories of 2 patients, one who caught it in time and one who didn't. And most importantly, I'll show you what steps to take next if you see even one of these signs. Because when it comes to Alzheimer's, waiting is not your friend, but awareness is. Before we go deeper, let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room and suddenly forgot why you were there? Have you found yourself retelling the same story to the same person and realizing it only after they gave you that awkward smile? Or maybe someone close to you, your spouse, your brother, a dear friend, has started repeating the same questions over and over. And you've been wondering quietly, is this just aging or is it something more? That question right there is the beginning of awareness. And it's exactly where we'll start. So stay with me. This might be the most important thing you listen to all week. And if it helps even one person catch the signs early, then it will have done its job. But before we get into the first quiet sign, the one most people ignore because it seems so harmless, let me ask you this. What if the way your brain forgets is actually the way it tries to cry for help? Let's begin. The first sign, subtle memory slips that feel too normal. His name was Harold, 72 years old, retired history teacher, proud grandfather of 5, and the kind of man who could recall the name of every U.S. president in chronological order. Until one day, he couldn't remember where he parked his car. At first, it was funny. Harold laughed it off, joking, "Guess I've finally hit that age where I need a GPS to find my own driveway." His wife, Joan, chuckled along. They chalked it up to stress or distraction, or maybe too many errands in one day. But then it happened again and again, this time not just with the car, but with names, with groceries, with appointments. Still, nothing seemed serious enough to raise the alarm. Because Harold still remembered his anniversary, still helped his grandkids with their homework, still told long stories about the Cold War, down to the year. So when he forgot a neighbor's name, someone he'd known for years, he just smiled and called him buddy. No one suspected a thing. That is how Alzheimer's begins. Most people think it starts with a dramatic loss. But the truth is, the earliest sign is often this: subtle lapses in short-term memory that feel so ordinary. We dismiss them. You forget why you walked into the kitchen. You can't recall where you placed your phone, even though it was in your hand a minute ago. You repeat the same question you asked 20 minutes earlier, and don't remember asking it the first time. These moments blend into the rhythms of daily life, especially after 60, when everyone expects a little forgetfulness. But here's the key difference. Healthy aging forgets part of the story. Alzheimer's forgets the story ever happened. And there's a second danger. These memory slips often go unnoticed by the person experiencing them. It's usually the partner, the child, the friend who catches the repetition, who hears the same sentence looped for the third time, who sees the grocery list never completed and begins to wonder quietly. From a medical perspective, this first stage is called mild cognitive impairment, MCI. It's not full-blown dementia, but it's the red flag zone, the point at which brain cells, especially in the hippocampus, begin to shrink. The hippocampus is the region of the brain responsible for short-term memory and learning, and in Alzheimer's, it's one of the first places affected. Like a filing cabinet drawer that no longer closes properly, papers go missing, details get misplaced, and eventually entire folders vanish. The tragedy is that this stage can last for years without a formal diagnosis, because the person is still functioning, still driving, still making dinner, still remembering birthdays, mostly. But underneath, the brain is fighting a quiet war. I once had a patient, Margaret, who came in for a routine blood pressure check. She smiled, laughed, even remembered my son's name. But her daughter, sitting quietly next to her, had tears in her eyes. She forgot she already ate breakfast, she whispered to me, and she's been calling the dog by the wrong name. That was the turning point. We ran tests. The early damage was there, subtle, but clear. The good news? At this stage, with the right support, cognitive decline can sometimes be slowed. There are programs, lifestyle changes, even medications that, when introduced early, can give the brain a fighting chance. But only if we notice. Only if we stop dismissing these memory slips as normal aging. So here's what I want you to ask yourself, or someone you love. Have you noticed short-term memory lapses that feel frequent? Are you repeating questions without realizing? Are others gently reminding you of things you said but don't remember? If the answer is yes, don't panic, but don't ignore it either. This might be the first quiet signal your brain is sending, and listening now could change everything later. In the next section, we'll talk about something even more subtle. Something that doesn't involve memory at all, but language. What happens when the words you want are suddenly out of reach? Stay with me. The second sign, difficulty finding the right words. During conversation, it often begins in the middle of a sentence. You're talking, explaining something you've said 100 times before. Maybe it's a story from your childhood, a recipe, a memory, and then suddenly you stop. The word is gone. Not a complicated word, not medical jargon. Just a simple word like mirror or calendar or refrigerator. You pause and you laugh. You say, "It's on the tip of my tongue." And maybe it comes back, or maybe you just point and say, "That thing, you know what I mean." This is the second early sign of Alzheimer's that slips past unnoticed. Difficulty retrieving words during conversation. It's not the same as forgetting what you were going to say. It's not losing your train of thought. It's something more specific, more frustrating. It's reaching for a word your brain has always had and finding nothing. I remember a woman named Lydia. She was 68 when her husband first noticed it. "She's still sharp," he told me, "but lately she pauses more, frowns when she's speaking, replaces words with gestures." When Lydia came into my office, she smiled and told me stories about her grandchildren. But as she spoke, I noticed the pattern too. She'd say, "We went to the place where you swim," and her husband gently filled in, "Pool." "Yes, pool," she said, grateful, and it happened again and again. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was language retrieval delay, a common early marker of cognitive decline. Here's what's happening inside the brain. In the early stages of Alzheimer's, the disease begins to affect the left temporal lobe, the region responsible for language and naming. Think of your brain as a vast library. Each word is a book, stored on a shelf. With normal aging, it might take a second longer to find the right shelf. But with Alzheimer's, The librarian forgets which section to look in. The word exists, but access is blocked. Over time, people with this symptom begin to avoid speaking as much. They grow quieter. Conversations become stressful instead of joyful. They start replacing specific words with vague ones. Thing, stuff, you know, that place. And then their sentences become shorter, less colorful, less precise. This change isn't just frustrating, it's heartbreaking, because language is how we connect. It's how we share memories, give advice, tell jokes, express love. And when those words go missing, something deeper goes missing too. For Lydia, her family thought she was just tired. They didn't realize she was quietly withdrawing, not because she had nothing to say, but because she couldn't find the words to say it. Eventually, she stopped joining group conversations altogether. Now here's the hopeful part. When this sign is caught early, when families recognize it and seek help, we can begin therapy that stimulates language recall. We can introduce memory games, conversation exercises, and even medication to slow down further decline. But the window for these tools is early. Once the language pathways degrade too much, rebuilding them becomes harder. So what can you do? Start by paying attention. Do you, or someone you love, find yourselves substituting simple words? Struggling to name common objects? Avoiding conversation not because of mood, but because it's too hard to keep up? If yes, don't dismiss it. Don't say, "We all do that sometimes," because when it starts to happen regularly, it might be your brain's second quiet signal. In the next part, we'll move into something even more elusive, the sensation of time slipping through your fingers. What happens when someone loses track of not just minutes, but entire days? Stay with me. What we talk about next might be something you've seen, but didn't know mattered. The third sign, losing track of time, even on familiar days. There's something unsettling about waking up and not knowing what day it is. For most people, that's a rare experience. Maybe it happens after a long vacation or during the holidays when the days blur together. But then it clicks. Oh, right, it's Tuesday, you tell yourself, and life moves on. But for someone in the early stages of Alzheimer's, that click doesn't come, not easily, not naturally. They wake up and feel disoriented. They look at the calendar but still feel unsure. They might ask multiple times in one day, "Is it Sunday already?" Or worse, "Did we already eat lunch?" This third sign is subtle at first, losing track of time, even when routines are familiar. Let me tell you about Mr. Thompson. He was a former accountant, always sharp with numbers. He lived by his planner, every appointment neatly logged, every bill paid on time. But in his early 70s, something began to shift. He started arriving to doctor's appointments on the wrong day. He got dressed for church on Wednesdays instead of Sundays. And one morning, he waited at the window for the school bus. His granddaughter had graduated years ago. His wife thought it was stress. Or maybe he was just bored after retiring. But as the confusion grew more frequent, she knew something wasn't right. Time, for Mr. Thompson, was beginning to unravel. You see, one of the first areas affected by Alzheimer's is the brain's internal clock, the ability to place events in sequence, to know what's happening today versus what happened yesterday. This sense of temporal orientation is deeply tied to short-term memory in the hippocampus. When that connection weakens, the mind begins to lose its grip on the flow of time. It's not just about forgetting the date, it's forgetting when things happen. What came before, what comes next. And it's incredibly confusing for both the person experiencing it and the people around them. I remember a woman named Carla, 75, who walked into her son's house at 6 a.m. with a bag of groceries. "I'm here to cook for Thanksgiving," she said with a smile. It was the middle of April. At first, her son thought it was sweet, but when she didn't understand the confusion on his face, he realized it wasn't just a mistake, it was disorientation, a gap in the calendar of her mind. Here's the hard truth. when someone begins to confuse morning for evening, weekday for weekend, April for November, it's more than forgetfulness. It's a sign the brain's timekeeping center is being compromised. And that disorientation often comes with anxiety, because deep down, the person feels that something is off, but they can't explain it. So they grow frustrated, irritable, withdrawn. That's why this sign often hides behind mood swings or fatigue. But the real culprit is deeper. Now, what can you do if you suspect this is happening? Start gently. Ask questions like, do you remember what we did yesterday? Or, what's the next thing on your calendar today? And if they struggle, don't blame them. Don't push, just observe. Because awareness without judgment creates a space for early intervention. There are strategies that can help: visual calendars, daily routines, reminders on smart devices. But more importantly, early recognition opens the door to getting a proper diagnosis, to knowing what you're dealing with, rather than living in quiet fear. And that knowledge, while painful, can also bring peace. Because now you can plan, now you can support, now you can prepare for what's next. And speaking of what's next, in the fourth sign, we shift from memory and time to behavior, to the moments when someone you love suddenly starts pulling away. Not because they're tired, not because they're upset, but because something inside them is quietly retreating. Let's talk about it. Because emotional withdrawal might not be what you think it is. The fourth sign, withdrawal from social activities without clear reason. You used to hear their laughter echo through the house. At family dinners, they were always the one telling stories. At church, they knew everyone's name. At the coffee shop, they had their usual table, their usual order, their usual smile. And then, slowly, they stopped showing up. No big announcement, no reason given, just a polite excuse. I'm tired today, maybe next time, or simply no reply at all. This fourth sign is perhaps one of the most overlooked: social withdrawal without an obvious reason. At first glance, it looks like someone just needs rest, or maybe they're going through a phase. But underneath the surface, something deeper is happening. A quiet fear is beginning to grow. The fear of not keeping up, the fear of forgetting a name, the fear of saying something that doesn't make sense, the fear of being seen as different. I remember George, 79, who had always been the life of every gathering. Barbecues, bingo nights, veterans reunions, he was there, smiling, sharp, always ready with a joke, until one summer, he started saying no. His daughter noticed first. He doesn't want to go out anymore, she said, sitting in my office. He says it's too noisy, too much trouble, but I think he's scared. She was right. When I spoke with George privately, he admitted something most people never say out loud. I can't remember people's names anymore. Doc, I don't want to embarrass myself. He looked down at his hands. It's easier to stay home. What George was experiencing is common in the early stages of Alzheimer's. As the brain struggles with memory and language, social situations become stressful. Small talk becomes a minefield. Faces blur together, stories get tangled, and so, the person begins to retreat, not out of laziness, but out of self-protection. From the outside, it may look like depression, but often it's not sadness at first, it's self-preservation. An attempt to avoid shame, confusion, or the painful moment of realizing they're not who they used to be. And here's the most heartbreaking part. They often feel it coming before anyone else does. They know something is changing. They can't name it, but they feel it. And in that silent awareness, they begin to grieve. Not openly, but quietly. By saying no to the invitations they once loved. By shrinking their world, one skipped gathering at a time. Now let me be clear. Not all withdrawal is a sign of Alzheimer's. People pull back for many reasons: fatigue, health issues, personal stress. But when social withdrawal comes alongside memory slips, word-finding problems, or time confusion, that's when it's time to look closer. And the answer isn't to push them harder, it's to meet them where they are. Create safe, small moments of connection, invite, but never pressure. And most importantly, observe. If you're noticing someone retreating from the world they once embraced, ask yourself, what might they be afraid of? What unspoken struggle might be hiding behind their silence? Because this kind of withdrawal isn't just about what they're avoiding, it's about what they're trying to hold on to. Dignity, familiarity, control, and with the right support, we can help them hold on to those things longer. We can create environments where they feel safe to show up, just as they are. Not perfect, not flawless, just real, still loved. But there's one more sign we need to talk about, one that doesn't live in memory, language, or time, one that lives in feeling. It's the moment you look into someone's eyes and realize their mood has changed, their spirit has shifted. They're not angry, not sad, just different. That's what we'll explore next, because the final early sign might be written not in words or actions, but in the subtle shifts of the heart. The fifth sign, changes in mood, that seem out of character sometimes. It's not the memory, not the words, not even the confusion with time or place. Sometimes what changes first is the mood, and that's why it gets missed. Because when a person becomes more irritable, more anxious, more withdrawn, we don't immediately think of Alzheimer's. We think they're tired, or going through stress, or just getting cranky with age. But in truth, the fifth early sign is this: a subtle shift in personality or mood, something that feels out of character. Not a full breakdown, not a dramatic episode, just small, quiet changes that, over time, begin to form a pattern. A normally calm person becomes agitated over small things. A friendly, social soul begins to mistrust others. A confident parent starts showing signs of fear. Fear of being alone, of going outside, of making decisions. I met a man named Frank, 74. He was steady, a retired engineer, logical, quiet, but warm, his wife told me. He never raised his voice, not once in 50 years. But recently, he'd started snapping at her, over little things. The soup being too hot, the TV remote going missing, the dog barking. She thought it was just frustration. But what unsettled her most was the look in his eyes, a kind of confusion behind the anger, as if he wasn't even sure why he was upset. When Frank came to my clinic, I asked him how he was feeling. He hesitated, then said softly, "Like something's wrong, but I don't know what." That statement stayed with me, because when the brain starts to change, so do emotions, especially when those changes are still hidden, still unspoken, still unexplained. Early Alzheimer's doesn't just affect memory, it also affects the frontal lobes, the part of the brain that regulates behavior, judgment, and emotional responses. When this area is disrupted, even slightly, a person may begin to feel things differently, react differently, trust differently. They may become more suspicious, more irritable, more withdrawn. And it's not because they've stopped loving you. It's because they're confused, scared, and trying to make sense of a world that suddenly feels unpredictable. One woman I worked with told me, "My mom used to laugh at everything. She was the light of the room. Now, she flinches when someone surprises her. She cries more. And sometimes she stares out the window for hours." And that's the thing about this fifth sign. It doesn't scream, it whispers. And often, it shows up long before anyone suspects Alzheimer's. But if you know what to look for, if you trust your gut when you feel something is off, you can catch it, not just for diagnosis, but for compassion. Because here's what people with Alzheimer's need most in the early stages: to be understood, to be seen, to be believed, not argued with, not corrected, not dismissed. If your loved one seems different, not dramatically, but subtly. Pay attention. It might not be stress. It might not be age. It might be a quiet call for help from a brain that's beginning to change. And if that's the case, there's one thing I want you to remember. Above all else, you are not too late. Even in the early sign, even in the silence, there is still time to act. And in the next final part of this video, I'll share exactly what you can do now to bring clarity, support, and hope back into this uncertain journey. Stay with me. Final message. You're not too late. Begin again. If you've seen one of these signs, or maybe more than one, I want you to take a deep breath, because this isn't the end. It's the beginning. A beginning that starts not with fear, but with awareness. Alzheimer's doesn't arrive overnight. It whispers before it roars. And the sooner we learn to hear the whisper, the more time we have to walk with it, not run from it. You see, the tragedy of this disease is not just in the forgetting, it's in the delay. The years spent explaining away the signs, laughing off the confusion, telling ourselves, it's nothing, just getting old. But aging doesn't steal your words, or your sense of time, or the core of who you are. Alzheimer's does, and the sooner we name it, the sooner we can soften its edges. I've seen it too many times. Families who caught it early, who had the hard conversations, who sought support before crisis came, and those families were able to hold on longer, to laugh longer, to plan, to prepare, to love fully without wondering what was wrong. I've also seen the other side, the quiet descent. The years lost in confusion and fear because no one wanted to say the word. Please don't wait. If this video has stirred something in you, a memory, a concern, a name of someone you love, take the next step. Talk to your doctor. Write down what you've noticed. Ask someone close to you, have you seen any of these changes in me? You might be surprised by how much they've been noticing too. And if you're supporting someone going through these signs, be gentle, be patient, be present, because what they're facing isn't just memory loss, it's identity loss. And what they need most is to feel safe, even as the world around them begins to blur. But here's the beautiful truth I've learned in 30 years of working with older adults. Even in the fog of Alzheimer's, love still reaches, music still moves, laughter still heals, and connection, real human connection, still finds its way in. So wherever you are on this journey, at the beginning, in the wondering, or walking beside someone who's already been diagnosed, know this, you are not alone. You are not powerless, and you are not too late. Start today. And if this message touched you in any way, I invite you to do something simple. Share it, because someone you know might be wondering in silence right now, afraid to ask, afraid to know, and maybe this video will be the quiet nudge they need. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And most of all, thank you for not turning away. There is still so much life left to live. Even here, even now, begin again.